Welcome back, everyone, to Connor Prairie's newest one and only podcast, Beyond the Revolution. I'm Easton.
And I'm Ryan.
And it's good to be back. Good to be back at the Prairie. We're open, by the way, and we got our new pins. And today we are joined by a spectacular guest with a wealth of knowledge. Let's learn a little bit about him. So our guest is the Youth Engagement Manager for Made by Us, co-founder of Youth250. He's a Forbes 30 Under 30 honoree, a recipient of the John Lewis Youth Leadership Award from the National Association of Secretaries of State. He serves on the Points of Light Board of Directors, and he was the youngest appointee ever in the Department of Commerce history through his service on the United States Census Bureau's 2030 Advisory Committee. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Alex Edgar.
Woo! Welcome.
Oh, it's always the weirdest thing when you hear other people talk about you as if you're not there.
Yeah.
But really excited for this conversation. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you just have to sit there while it's happening.
While I read your resume, yeah.
I mean, you recently just did that to me, so I don't feel too bad because you did that to me when we were in Philadelphia.
Fair enough.
I like to say you put both the youth and engagement in youth engagement. Truly, I'm very excited about this conversation. Me and Alex have been working for over a year now together through Made by Us, Youth250. And yeah, I'm excited to dig into this conversation. This is kind of the meat of the work that Connor Prairie hopes to do when we're engaging people for America 250. And Alex is, doing that on a national scale, which is incredible.
The perfect person to ask.
So let's dig into it. We need to get a couple of definitions out of the way. If you've listened to previous episodes, especially the one with Norman, we do mention Made by Us and Youth250. But Alex, can you explain to us what History Made by Us is?
Of course. And we're very, very lucky that Connor Prairie has been so deeply involved, and Norman's been, very, very deeply involved at Made by Us on our board. So yeah, it's such a joy to be here with you guys. So Made by Us is a national coalition of museums and cultural institutions across all 50 states. We're all dedicated to better engaging young adults, not just as a target audience, although we definitely are helping partners get boots in the door, but really thinking about how can we get more young people of all different backgrounds to help lead the direction of our cultural institutions, from helping shape exhibits and programs and content to actually taking on leadership roles in shaping the direction of our cultural institutions. So back in 2019, a bunch of museum leaders came together and recognized the fact that there's a lot of K through 12 programming in the museum world, school field trips and STEM and civic camps, and there's a lot of general audience programming that tends to be a kind of 50 plus demographic. So Made by Us was launched as this really collaborative effort to bring 18 to 30-year-olds into museums and cultural institutions and help them shape how we tell our country's story, engage in its history, scientific innovation, all sorts of things. And since 2019, we have grown a ton and have launched both Civic Season and Youth250, two of our key programs that I'm sure I'll share more about in a bit.
Yeah, it is interesting, and I love the mission because I definitely felt that going through college. I didn't go to a lot of museums, which is weird now looking back because I go to a ton of museums. But in college,
perhaps the person I know that goes to the most museums, actually, Ryan.
Right. And I'm not sure why. I went to school really close to Connor Prairie. Never went to Connor Prairie until I got this job. And so it's great. I know, Easton, you have a similar background there.
Yeah, I mean, being from Cincinnati, you have, there's museums all over the place, and local too. Like the Over the Rhine Museum is really cool. I worked on walking tours with them, but it was always a concept of working there first. I didn't really go to museums for leisure unless somebody else was paying for the trip, which is interesting.
Right, and having your voice heard at those museums.
Yeah.
What I'll share just with this point, Ryan and Easton, I think is that That's exactly why Made by Us started, is because, that is the experience of most young people in America, is unless they are quite literally like history nerds that are really interested in whatever subject, or their parents are taking them. Most young people are not, kind of guiding themselves to their local museum or cultural institution when we know there's more museums in the United States than there are Starbucks. And if you
Right.
think about it, if you ask the average person, can you name your local Starbucks? They're a lot more likely to know where that is than your local museum. And I,
Mm.
just as you were talking, was thinking about there's these four questions we use a lot at Made by Us when talking to partners to think about, like, how do you approach bringing, like, what mental state, what persona is going to be this young person coming to a museum? And we ask ourselves, is this for me? Who else will be there? Do I know enough? And why should I care? And we always tell our partners to think in that framework of, like, if you can answer those four questions for a young person, you're going to be able to start building those, very authentic bridges into a youth community that oftentimes, all three of us are examples of this, don't really exist authentically for most young people in communities of all shapes and sizes across the country.
Yeah. And coming from a museum now background, I think a lot of people skip to that last question, why should I care, but not the building towards that, because you still have to like get them through the door and get them interested before you can explain why you should care. And so I love that framework, and yeah, that's really great. And also I just to sort of pivot a little bit, talking about how not only see themselves but also have let young people have a little bit of ownership and agency and have a voice in these museums that are supposed to be representing the community. I One of the responses Made by Us did was create this Youth250 bureau, um, and I think it's great, especially for museums who can't don't have the resources, don't have the time to have like their own youth board, because obviously having your own youth board from members of your own community would be ideal, but for so many museums across the country, that's just not possible. So how how did Youth 250 come about, and what were the things you're hoping to solve? What were the goals there?
100%. So I had started working with Made by Us initially as a civic season design fellow, and had stayed engaged over the years. And then in the beginning of 2024, our executive director, Caroline Klibanoff, and Dylan St. Bernard, who's been a creative strategist with Made by Us for quite some time, they came to me about this idea of Youth 250. They said, we know we need to do something. We've been talking about the 250th. We've been building up to it for so long, but we don't entirely know, like, how do we make this matter both for young people and also for the cultural institutions who make up Made by Us. So kind of in beginning to mid 2024, we did lots of listening to our partners, to young people across the country, and then launched the series of workshops, one of them actually at Prairie. And in different communities, we had one in Atlanta, one in Philadelphia, one in Salt Lake City, another at Stanford, one in DC. So all over the country, bringing together local young people and institutional leaders at museums, but also in government, in community nonprofits and foundations, really to try to get to the crux of what is the thing that works for young people and works for institutions. Because we know if we were just going to answer one of those questions, this program wouldn't work.
Right.
And as a result of these workshops, we developed a couple of things. The Youth 250 Bureau that you mentioned, Ryan, and you have been an incredible part of, which was 100 young people, 18 to 30 from across the country. We got hundreds of applications, and got it down to this phenomenal group of 100 who are from 45 states and territories. They range from folks that are currently in the workforce to students in rural communities and urban, all different backgrounds and political identifications. And what was really special about the Youth 250 Bureau is we designed it very intentionally to be something that was not everyone being there who were big into museums and big into history, right? This was really a group of people that looked and spoke a lot more like your average young person than oftentimes are found in spaces like this. So as a result, we built this bureau. They got a bunch of training from partners at Smithsonian and Teen Vogue and McKinsey about, how do you tell your story? How do you support older leaders in recognizing the importance of youth engagement? And truly built out this army of Gen Z consultants who were sent out to work with museums and cultural institutions, but also with higher education institutions, with state 250th agencies, with philanthropic organizations, community nonprofits in all corners of the country, and did not just do advising, they also were speaking on panels, they were writing op-eds, they were telling their stories all over the place. And we're really, really thrilled that beyond just as you were saying, Ryan, like a lot of our partners don't have the capacity currently to develop their own youth capacity. So they were tapping into us. But a really positive impact of this work is we were able to guide through these Youth250 Bureau members. A lot of organizations actually have started up their own youth capacity. For instance, the National Museum of Women's History, the National Women's History Museum just opened their applications for their Youth Advisory Council, and they used the resources and guidance of Youth250 and Made by Us in creating that opportunity. So we really have seen such positive impacts from the Youth250 Bureau. And the other major piece that came out of the Youth250 workshops that we really have enjoyed is the Youth250 Toolkit. So this was, an initial version and a second version, one focused on young adults, so our 18 to 30-year-old demographic, and the other focused on teens. And these two toolkits had a ton of resources that were designed specifically for cultural institution leaders to get the internal buy-in they need for doing youth engagement work, to build their own youth capacity, and to create programs, content, strategies that authentically brought young people to the table in a way that enabled those institutions to thrive and also those young people to feel valued in these institutions. And what's really incredible, one of the pieces of this toolkit is a Gen Z engagement scorecard. And we've been able to track through our partners over 450 different cultural institutions have taken this scorecard that gives them direct kind of like benchmarks of where they're at in their journey of developing their youth capacity. And it's been a really helpful tool for hundreds and hundreds of institutions across the country who have used it. So those are like two of the really big things that came from these listening tours. Because we knew, again, like it can't just be something that lives inside the institutions or only with young people. It had to be this kind of meeting in the middle that we were able to build together.
Yeah, and I know both of us kind of had touch points in different ways at that. Easton was at one of those listening sessions, the one that was here at Prairie, and I was on that initial, how I originally got involved with Youth250 was one of the initial toolkits. And something that I know me and Easton have had conversations about is how much we appreciate the way you started that conversation, because I know for our generation, sometimes it's hard to be like, America 250, where do we start with that? Like, how, instead of just like asking, oh, how do you want to celebrate America? It's like, okay, how do you want your voice heard? What are you looking for in this institution? And yeah, anything you also want to say about your experience in the original listening session?
Well, it was very cool. It was very hip. It was, I don't know. I honestly walked in just not really knowing what to expect. Like, I think I was expecting someone to be like, hey, how are we going to get these kids hyped about history? Like, how are we going to get, like, I don't know. It's not like I didn't think it was going to be worthwhile, but
you're so used to like, oh, why don't kids like history?
Yeah. And so I was, I think I came in more expecting to give like, this is how I think we'll fix this problem. And yet I think the collaboration was really, really cool. I liked hearing other people's perspectives. I liked that there were other museum professionals there, like, someone from the Freedom Center was there, someone from like people from all over the place. And so, yeah, it definitely got me thinking more about how I personally can contribute where I am without necessarily having the entire answer.
Right. And another thing, go ahead.
Sorry. It's this is why I wish I was in person. It makes the flow so much easier. But I was gonna say is I appreciate you sharing that, Easton. And I think for us, one of the things that we also were very intentional about, both of these, listening tours, but also just in all of our work, is that it's not something that we just jump into ever. Right. It is not you walk into a room and say, okay, here is the big question on everyone's minds. As you said, Ryan, like, how do we make young people care about a country that they may not feel particularly fond of? Like, we 100% and many convenings will be just that, right? Of, listen to some people talk and then say, how are we going to solve this existential problem? What I think was really, really awesome about, these listening sessions was that it started with play and getting to know the people in the room and also a tour of the space that they were in. And I think that was really critical and spending like genuinely the first half of the day, not actually doing the like brain heavy work of thinking through what could Youth 250 look like, but was really focused on how do we break down the generational tensions and differences. There was a meme exchange because we know that figuring out each other's humor is a great way to actually understand who this human being is sitting next to you. There's a snowball fight with different responses they put on paper and threw across the room, right? Things that like are not your traditional strategy session engagement that I think is what led to Youth 250 being so successful, is that we developed it through intentional buy-in from community members that were able to actually understand the unique perspectives of the person sitting next to them and across from them in a way that so frequently, I think, in not just the museum world and in a lot of our professional spaces, we're so quick to rush to how do we solve the question, how do we get the best answer, as opposed to how do we understand the people we're actually talking about, we're trying to serve, we're trying to engage, and actually bring them to the forefront of what that might look like.
Yeah, and to your point, community building is such a huge part of this because it, in a lot of ways, it solves a lot of the issues we're dancing around of not understanding each other. Well, let's just get in a room and start talking, or some of the issues we may not like with our country. But once you actually get people comfortable with each other, start talking in a room, you start breaking down those walls, you start understanding. Again, there might still be some differences, but you have a much better like common understanding of each other. I'm also curious because if you don't mind me going a little bit behind the scenes of Youth250 Bureau, again, we're all Gen Z, and a lot of us may not have like the best opinions of our country right now. But the way you set up training was very intentional, of building up a way for us to, I don't know, communicate our thoughts in a constructive way for these conversations that we were going to have. So what was your thought process in kind of the trainings to get the youth to eventually talking to partners and, coalition building and all of that?
Yeah, well, I'm sure, well, not to speak for either of you, but I at least am someone who was so bad at like the sit in the classroom part of school. Like I hated sitting in lecture halls and definitely skipped a bit too many classes as a result of that. So when we were thinking through this process of training, so all of our Youth 250 Bureau members received around 25 hours of training and community building through our partners and network. We really wanted to make sure that this was something that people would actually like be excited to be a part of, because again, these are not people who are all coming in with the same level of knowledge and understanding about museums, about American history, about how do you do good communications. Like everyone was coming at such different places, and I think what enabled this to be so successful as we were building it is that it really was intentional about things that everyone had something to learn about. And for instance, one of our first sessions, we brought in multiple experts on Gen Z who lead research. So we brought in our friends from Circle, which is the Center for Information and Research on Civic Learning and Engagement. We had a communication strategist who does work around user personas and actually like walked us through like what type of persona are you as someone who is online and thinking about, what type of events you'd want to go to, what type of opportunities you tap into, right? So that was the thing that like even someone like myself who like quite literally gets asked to talk about Gen Z all the time, like I still learned a ton from our guests because each person we brought in was really intentionally an expert in a way that like also enabled the activities and conversations we had both with and after the guests gave their presentations, enabled everyone, I think, pretty much every session to walk away with some new thing that they can apply to their work. And I think that to us was one of the best parts. And also from getting feedback, so we did these kind of like benchmark reports with the beginning of the Youth250 Bureau, at the end of the training, during the participation, and then at the end of their experience, because everyone was officially part of the Youth250 Bureau for just a year. So when we were tracking this, we asked a couple questions that we thought were really important. We asked about the Youth250 Bureau members' feelings about their own patriotism, their influence on the United States, their belief in older generations, valuing their voices, ability to collaborate across generations, and their own comfort speaking up and sharing their opinions. And I think one thing that was a very validating kind of data to look at is that in every single one of those categories, we saw really large increases. So for feeling valued by older generations, our Youth250 Bureau members had a 51-point average increase in that feeling. In patriotism, a 46-point average increase. In being able to influence the future of the US, an average 47-point increase. And in confidence, collaborating across generations, an average 23-point increase. So we're talking about like real tangible mindset shifts with the young people we worked with. And a lot of that from our kind of like qualitative pieces of working with the Youth250 Bureau came from the fact that a lot of these young people, this was their first real like civic leadership opportunity. That's not to say all of them are leaders in their communities in different ways, on sports teams, in their places of worship. But this is the first time they really felt, they were in a leadership role at a large level. And to be in conversations with the leaders at the Smithsonian or folks at the Carnegie Corporation of New York, and being treated as an equal and as an expert really has such a massive impact on these young people's ability to feel connected and to feel like they have a role in not just their own communities, but in shaping the future of our country. And I think that as part of this kind of training process was one of the things that worked out really well, was connecting people of all different backgrounds to this shared idea that young people have the power to make a true impact on the 250th and at our country writ large.
I 100% agree. I know when I first got into it, I wasn't expecting myself to have that kind of shift in mindset, but I 100% did. And part of it was kind of breaking down those assumptions of like what people think America 250 programming should be, or what this, commemoration should look like. Because I was worried it was like, oh, they're just looking at getting, young people to kind of rubber stamp the stuff that they had already planned, or like, and clearly that was not the case. And then the other thing that really was inspiring to me was being in community with so many people from across the country, very similar to me, trying to do really cool work, right? It like is 100% getting in communication with those institutions, but also recognizing that you're not alone in this work. And that, people all over the country are struggling with the same, ideas of patriotism that you might be, but are still willing to, go out and try and make the country better, or try and make this generation's voices heard. Truly was inspiring me. And I think, at least from my perspective, that shifted my idea of patriotism too, because I'm like, oh, I'm really proud of our generation. I'm really proud of the work that we're doing. And that all came through being able to, meet every month and, well, early on every week and then every month. But so I thank you. But
Thank you for being such an incredible piece of it. And I think what I really appreciate, and Brian, you're a perfect example of this, is like you are one of a few people who are actually work in the museum field that were part of the Bureau. And as a result of that, you were able to bring a really unique perspective to these conversations and kind of like even more of a peer like conversation on some of these consultations that I think was really helpful to some of our people who might have, been a lot more in community organizing, or our engineers, or one of our bureau members is a Domino's franchise owner. Like, these people are from all different walks of life. And I think that in addition to, of course, the training that we pulled together, you're 100% right that it was this community of people that in no other way would these people probably ever be in the same community. And to have these opportunities to meet and learn from one another, I think was just such a phenomenal thing to watch. And I was just always like amazed at how much the conversation was going and continuing. And one of the biggest pieces of feedback we got was everyone wishes there was more in-person opportunities because they wanted to, meet these people and continue learning and building on these incredible ideas that they've been talking about together.
Yeah, and sometimes I know I've talked to you about this. Like, going into museums, I feel like I have to be professionalized and like take away from what it means to be a part of this generation a little bit. And so it was nice to like, oh, these are the questions that this generation has about museums that I've kind of been removed from, because this is the world that I live in, is the museum world. And so it's like, oh yeah, that isn't as accessible because you're not used to that. Or it did open my eyes up to and help me in my current position at a museum to what other people are thinking. Something I'm also curious for you, Alex. I know sometimes it's really hard, and you probably get asked a lot to like speak for the generation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we'll start with this question. First off, what was it like for you as a Gen Z person to lead this program?
Yeah, I mean, it is really funny being 22 years old, managing a group of 18 to 30-year-olds. And especially, when I first actually started at Made by Us, I was only 20 years old. So I think a really interesting experience being a young person myself and having to coordinate this group of young people who just were, very different ends of the youth spectrum. And one thing I think actually just was such a learning moment, even for me, was being able to recognize the fact that within a generation, generations are on average about 15 or 16-year long periods. And it's often talked about as if it's a very formal thing with lots of shared identity. And I think working and, leading the Youth250 Bureau and a lot of our work, really just showed me how much the generation label does not map on in this super neat way. And some of my favorite reflections from people was like, a college student is not frequently talking with like a young parent who's like 28 and works a full-time job and has kids. Like, you
Right.
at 19, most of your friends and the people you interact with are also 19 and in college in the same location, right? Like, so it was
Yep.
this really cool opportunity for me, but also for our Youth250 Bureau members and broader community to really learn so much more about the many different life stages within our generation, which I think was a really kind of beautiful process, and seeing even within our different community groups. So we had community groups that were largely kind of broken down in 3 to 4 year age increments. There was even building, within those 3 to 4 year groups, there was a lot of kind of cross learning and then interaction with, both older and younger communities, where there was really like an apparent difference in experience. It was awesome learning, based on where people were during the pandemic, how they, felt about virtual meetings and learning and opportunity, or depending on even what part of the country they were in, that there were a lot of these differences. So for me personally, I've been both very fortunate to be in a position to speak out a lot in conferences, meetings, podcasts, other spaces about what's going on with young adults, and this was such an incredible opportunity to deepen and kind of expand my understanding of young people across the country, and have had the privilege of speaking on podcasts like this and in other places where I'm able to actually draw from the incredible lived experiences of our Youth 250 community and their communities, and many of them have shared different stories and different kind of data points that they've seen in their worlds that have been incredibly helpful in shaping what our institutional leaders do, say, and think. Because I'll say, for me, what really got me into this work, as I mentioned, I have no background in museums. I didn't study museums. I've never worked in a museum. But ultimately, I was incredibly inspired by this opportunity to build out Youth 250, because my background was in kind of more traditional voter engagement and education. And it was when I was leading this work back at UC Berkeley, my alma mater, that I recognized how many decisions were being made about young people without those young people invited to the table. And the number of times I'd be representing thousands and thousands of students as the one voice in a room full of adults making decisions about thousands and millions of dollars, about programs, about course requirements, all of these big decisions that actually had such a massive impact on the lives of young people, and young people were never included or authentically brought to the table. And that's why, to me, like, this opportunity, both as a young person myself and being able to directly fund, right, because all of our Youth 250 Bureau members were paid for their time, to give opportunity for leadership, for connecting to professional opportunities, to learning more and building out their network across the country, was something that was just such an incredible opportunity. And I feel so grateful to have been able to both share a lot from my own experience, but also learn so much from our Youth 250 community and from our cultural institution partners, who are just always super insightful about the different trends we're seeing at a local and national level.
And I'm sure you're also very thankful for all of the data that it provides too. Like, you actually now have hard numbers that you can back up with. It's not just me saying this. It's, we took all this survey data. All the time it's like, oh, Ryan, you're young. What do you think? I'm like, well, that's complicated because I love museums. So like, I'm going to go anyway. But yeah, you guys are collecting data, not just from the Youth 250 Bureau, but from all sorts of places. And that also can help museums make decisions. Again, ideally you would have young people involved, but again, time, resources, the data is there. You can go see what young people are trending towards or not trending towards.
100%. And Ryan, what I'll share is on like the kind of cultural institution side of the data, the Gen Z engagement scorecard that I mentioned that we really pushed out as part of Youth 250. One of the most interesting parts of it is that we had a kind of self-assessment on this scorecard. So we asked all of these folks taking the scorecard on a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being best and 1 being worst, rate how you think your organization engages the following audiences. So we had, kids 0 to 13, teens 13 to 18, young adults 18 to 30, adults 30 to 55, and then adults 55 plus. And I think this was the kind of perfect validation of why we are so dedicated to this work at Made by Us, and do everything we can through Youth 250, through Civic Season, through our coalition, to support our cultural institution partners. Because I'll share, the best categories were 0 to 13, 30 to 55, and 55 plus. So 0 to 13 was 3.64, adults 30 to 55 was 3.8, adults 55 plus, 4.47 out of 5. And then you go to teens age 13 to 18, that was 2.57 out of 5. And young adults ages 18 to 30, 2.69 out of 5. So, right, you see there's a clear difference. Like, over a point between this like teen and young adult range and every other age group, which is why we feel so passionate about doing everything we can to get the data, to get the resources, to get the opportunities to our cultural institution partners so that they can increase this number in communities all across the country.
And I also do want to ask Alex, how do you, if you have peers, like, I just to say from my perspective, like, not all my friends are interested in like history very much. I try my best. If anything, they reach out to me. They're like, Easton, tell us a fun history fact
and stuff like that. I'm like, I mean,
they probably
and
say
after a while,
you're good at trivia is what they ask you for.
Well, I'm not too bad. But what I will say is, I would just want to ask you, like, how do you get your peers to care about this kind of collaboration, especially collaboration between like, older and younger generations? Because, a lot of the discourse is that like the younger generation, the older generations are just so fundamentally different that they can't collaborate. And then, yeah, so I'll leave that there because that's a big question on its own.
No, and thank you for asking that. And I'll share two different answers. One on kind of the 250th / cultural institution piece, and one on just more broadly the intergenerational collaboration piece. So when it comes to the 250th, I think it so often kind of is falling into two camps right now. There is American exceptionalism and American pessimism, right? The two options you have for the 250th, and at least how most people feel, is either America is the best place ever, we've never done anything wrong, or America's the worst place ever, we've only ever done wrong.
Gosh.
We and that oh gosh means you feel that too.
Yeah.
So a lot of our work with Youth 250, but also like as we talk to cultural institutions about all of their 250th work, even the stuff that's not focused on young people, is we really focus on this idea that we have to push the fact that the 250th is not just about what happened 250 years ago. It's about that everything that has happened 1776 to now, and everything that's possible in the next 50, 100, 250 years of our country.
And that's why this podcast is called Beyond the Revolution.
Yeah, literally. That's exactly the reason that we named it that. Is that right there.
We're on the same page. I love to hear it. Right, but that, like, obviously it makes sense why y'all would be focused on this as well, because it is just so critical for folks to recognize that this is not just about reenactments. It's not just about the original 13 colonies. This is about the people and the movements and the opportunities that have come over the past 250 years, and what that means as young people are stepping up in this moment as really the new founding generation of our country. I think one of the pieces I love the most is our founding fathers are a lot younger than our leaders today, right? They were in their 20s, their 30s, their 40s. And if you look at our leadership, we've had, the two of the oldest presidents recently. All of our leaders in Congress, in, the business world are a lot older than the people that actually, had the bold idea to start off our country. And I think when you present that opportunity to young people saying, this is not something that exists just in a museum, or, it just is about, Ken Burns' incredible documentary, but really is something that exists in your communities all across the country, from Alaska all the way down to Puerto Rico, that this is an opportunity for folks to reflect and engage with what it means to be an American and what they want to see from their country, which is why, we launched these wish walls across the country. And I know Connor Prairie had an awesome wish wall as well of like, what is your wish for the future of the US? And I got to tell you, and I'm totally going off track of the question a bit, but one of my favorite parts about these wish walls is everyone always asks. So you're asking the general public what their wish for the future of the country is. They must be super pessimistic because all we hear in the news and on social media is that everything's falling apart. And when I tell you that from DC to Connor Prairie to LA, all over the country, a majority, almost every single wish we get is incredibly hopeful. It is an incredible opportunity to invite folks, whether they're 4 years old and they just draw a dinosaur, because that's the best they can do for their wish, or you're 80, 90 years old and you're writing, an emotional wish about, the future that you want for your children and grandchildren. And that when given the opportunity, I really do believe that Americans are hopeful about what's possible on the horizon. And that, to me, is the message when talking to 50th to especially young people, but folks of all generations. And when talking, about why museums and cultural institutions and young people being involved in how we tell our country's story is so critical. So that's kind of the 250th and kind of museum world piece. In terms of why intergenerational collaboration is so important for this moment, but for all of our work at Made by Us and beyond, I think we don't often take a second to think about the fact that age is the only thing we all share. Everyone knows what it feels like to be a young person. You might have, other identities that intersect with what that felt like for you personally, but it is a universal thing. Aging is the only thing we all share. So I think as part of that, it's really critical to invite those conversations with leaders about why there is such an opportunity for them to not replicate the systems that perhaps might have prevented them from achieving their dreams and finding the opportunities that they always wanted. Like, we don't actually have to maintain the status quo, and it's only through really intentional conversations. Because for most older adults, and I'll always own up to this myself, I used to be ageist. I was so ageist, especially when I was in college. I was 100% the person that was like, let's burn it down, let's kick these old people out, let's put age limits on everything. Like, I just have had enough.
Oh.
But then through my work with Cogenerate, an incredible nonprofit that's been brought in to do a lot of work with Made by Us, and I'm fortunate to now serve on the board of directors of, they just expanded my worldview a ton around the opportunity that comes from intergenerational collaboration, and what it looks like that you actually really have to sit down with older generations and help them understand that most people want older people to live good lives too, just as much as they care about living their best lives as well. And that it's only actually possible for all people to thrive if we work together. Because there is, incredibly important institutional knowledge and understanding and ideas that come from our older leaders. But, we also know that our young people are unburdened by what has come before them. Right. Kind of Kamala Harris coconut tree moment, but like, it's true, right? Like, like it is so important to bring these young people who are not seeing systems in the rigidity that older generations often do, to really kind of bring that innovative spirit and energy to the work, so that they can really push, their communities forward, their institutions forward, and through that, our country forward as well.
And
Wow.
yeah, this is why we brought you on, obviously. But even when I was in the small piece that I got to see with Youth250, I was amazed by how often too old people are interested in what young people have to think once you actually get down to it. And yeah, sometimes it is this fear of like, oh, but this is the rigidity of this institution. But like, when we were talking to museum leaders all across the country, they were just like, let us know what you want to see at museums. Let us know, what are the things that you want to do. They're eager to hear, and I'm sure you have the data to back this up, also implement the things that we're interested in seeing.
100%. And on that piece of implementation, we saw through the surveys we did after our cultural institution and nonprofit partners worked with the Youth250 Bureau, that 80% of those recommendations that they got through these sessions, they were planning on implementing within the first year post the consultation. And these are, some of the things are the small minutia of, maybe you should do an extra Instagram reel instead of another static post, right? Super easy, super doable on a short-term basis. But a lot of them were also really larger structural things about how they thought about building relationships in their local communities, whether it was, building a relationship with a local Black student union, and inviting those young people directly, not going to their faculty advisor or to the student, university government itself, but going directly to a student organization to ask them to, host an event in your space or to partner on a shared programming. So I think that to us was like a really beautiful win from this project, was seeing just how many of these institutions were actually making these tweaks that they, were recommended from our youth community. And all of them, well, I was really happy to see, every single organization that worked with the Youth 250 Bureau reported that working with them increased their understanding of Gen Z, improved their 250th strategies, taught them something new with long-term value, and increased their confidence in engaging young audiences. And I think that goes directly to your point, Ryan, of like, when you build the permission structure, when you invite older leaders in with the understanding that this is going to be a shared space for mutual learning, the opportunities that come from that process really, like, they blow my mind still. And I do this work all day, every day. Like, it is so incredible seeing that, like, when you're not approaching a leader with animosity, but really thinking about it as an opportunity for shared growth, there is just, the sky is the limit in what we can do in our communities and all across the country.
Oh man, yeah. That reminds me of something. I don't know if you guys have seen this video, but there's a video that I saw on Instagram, but I don't know where it originates from, of like, I think it starts with like a tweet from like 2023 about how like the older generation doesn't have a lot of trust in the younger generation. And then it goes back to like a Facebook post from like 2006. And essentially it goes back like decade by decade until we get to like the BC times, and they're still talking about how like now we're getting into like parchment and letters and these like tablets that are always like kind of shown this cyclical nature of the older generation is always like worried and yet also kind of doesn't think the younger generation is going to make it. But it also like, and again, you could take that as like the big takeaway. But one thing that I kind of thought was like, this kind of cyclical nature of these younger generations who the older generation didn't really have a lot of faith in, then become the older generation. And it kind of just recycles through this whole thing. But at least now we're starting to take note of that and using it as a basis for collaboration instead of just, there go the young folks acting crazy again.
Yeah, I have hope that, especially with all of the work that's being done, but even like millennials, I think kind of still get it, because they held the brunt of it, especially in the internet age of like, oh, they're the young kids, and now they're having their own kids and whatever. But yeah, it's hopefully something that can be broken in the future.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I'll share on this note, Ryan and Easton, not to like totally pivot us into a different direction, but I just really resonate, Easton, with that kind of conversation of every generation has been the new bad generation. Like, it has always happened. And one interesting kind of project I'm working on outside of Made by Us world is with the Sherm Foundation, who's really focused on kind of future of work stuff in our country writ large. And it's a really interesting problem that we're kind of navigating, and it really relates to the work here at Made by Us, is this idea that, for millennials, when they were coming into the workplace and saying, I want a mental health day, I think, we should have definite lunch hour that I'm allowed to step away from my desk and go get food, right? As a lot of these kind of well-being pieces that came with millennial generation were brought into the workplace, there was a lot of generational tensions that popped up. And what's interesting is that back then, right, if let's say those generational tensions led to a millennial who were at that time the young generation employee getting fired, it was very likely that they were going to be replaced by another millennial employee. And the reality that we're in now, we're really trying to develop some resources and tools for employers around this, is that now with the increase of AI adaptation, the likelihood that generational tensions won't lead to a young person getting fired, a Gen Z employee getting fired and getting replaced by an AI instead of another Gen Z employee, due to what we're seeing as a really kind of a little frightening job market in the next 3 to 5 years for entry-level talent. And that's why, to me, I think, in kind of connecting this back to the Made by Us world and our cultural institutions, is that it's why it's so important that we're investing in young people, not just as, kind of the collaborative force that they can be, but thinking about, if we're not bringing young people in now, they're not going to have any allegiance to cultural institutions. They're not going to be the donors of tomorrow if they're not brought in as the leaders of today. And I think so often we get caught within our institutions of like, these are the structures that have existed. And we're seeing right now with AI just how much that is shifting in all aspects of our worlds, what that kind of status quo can look like. And I think it is yet another opportunity in the cultural institution world for us to tell the importance of the human beings that are in our spaces, and are helping, make these community civic hubs such an awesome opportunity for young people and folks of all ages across the country.
I don't know. There's a lot to unpack there because obviously in my field, I am scared AI is going to take over. Luckily, in museums, there is some ethics around what AI should be doing. But as a creative, yeah, a lot of the stuff that we're doing, either video, even like audio writing, all of that, can be done by AI, and whether or not an audience enjoys that is something to be seen, but or adapts it.
Oh gosh, yeah, this conversation. Some of my friends made me really mad the first time they brought up, like, Easton, AI could do your job. I'm like, excuse me?
Easton, you're irreplaceable.
Thank you, Alex. And like you think about it's called the humanities, right? Like you would hope that the human part of humanities would stay.
You know what we should do?
What should we do?
Go to the Joy Corner.
Let's go to the Joy Corner.
The natural curiosity of youth.
Alex, how you feel about some joy?
I love joy.
Great. So I have some questions for you in the same spirit that you just brought in about having the opportunity to step away from some of the heavy stuff. We too step away at this podcast. So I'm going to ask you two questions. One that's like, these are both kind of fun, but I'm going to ask you two random questions just to let you riff and do your thing that have nothing to do with Youth250 or the generational gap. How does that sound?
I am thrilled.
Cool. Gotcha. So I'll start with this one first. Where is your favorite place in the world? We're going to answer two, but we want you to answer first, unless you don't want to answer first.
Where's my favorite place in the world? And this is going to be like a gosh answer, but I really like whenever I am with my community, that is my favorite place. I think especially as someone who works remotely and travels a bunch and does all these things, that I'm always most joyful, most happy when I am with my loved ones, wherever that is in location.
I love that. That it's not necessarily a set place. It's more of like a mind state and a heart state.
Yeah.
Both of ours are just regular places, though. I was going to be cliche, but you live there now. DC has like my heart. I love DC, but I think it's Virginia. Honestly, it might just be Virginia as a whole, because my family's from there. Whenever I'm out there, it just feels like rejuvenating. So I am going to say Virginia.
The V of the DMV.
Yeah.
I understand. For me, I think I'm going to go kind of in the middle, not to leave you behind, Ryan, because I know I said I was going to say Cincinnati, but Cincinnati is like, I'm from a suburb that's near Cincinnati. So being able to literally, as I got older, explore the city, especially surrounded by people growing up who were like, I can't wait to move away from Cincinnati. I'm going to LA. I'm going to Florida. I really was like, well, hang on. There's some cool stuff. We literally had one of our AP teachers snuck in a test question that was like, what's the square in the middle of Cincinnati? And the correct answer is Fountain Square. But she put Times Square and Monument Square, and only 40% of us got it right. I got it right. And so it just kind of speaks to we have this beautiful city right next to us. It's 30 minutes away. And yet some people just don't have, I'm not slamming people for being ignorant. But what I am saying is like, I knew that, but like
have an appreciation for where you are.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
And that's my thing. Just like even before I knew that history was what I wanted to do, I loved going to just around Cincinnati and discovering like, oh, that's what that museum was. And that's what that place is. And oh, that's what these historic markers mean. So like, and then so now like every time I go back to Cincinnati, it is very much like oh, this is my city. And I'm very happy. I'm very happy with my family because that's where my family's from. Not originally, but now. And so it is just a good time. I've appreciated it now that I've moved away also.
No offense to Indiana.
But yeah, well said. Now I have another one. So this one's a little bit wider.
Okay.
So what life-altering things, or thing, I guess I should say, should every human being ideally get to experience at least once in their life?
Ooh. Okay. Well, what I'll share is kind of a bit of a stretch on your question, but I guess that's just where I'm at today. I'm a pusher.
Go for it.
But what my New Year's resolution for 2026 was to visit as many world religions as I can this year. So every other weekend is about the pace I've been at. Me and some assortment of friends and community members are just going to different churches and temples and religious centers all over of all different denominations. And I am personally Jewish and was raised practicing, but I think I had this moment at the end of last year where I was like, I just don't know enough about how other people find themselves in this big universe that we live in. And it has been, I think, the most educational experience I've ever had. And I'd say I'm a fairly like empathetic person, but I think my understanding of how other people walk into any room, any relationship, any space has expanded so much by actually joining people in their places of worship and understanding how they approach the mundane and the spiritual in a way that I think if I could get every person around the country to just, experience more religions outside of their own, I think we would all live in a much better connected country than we do live in today.
Wow.
I 100% agree.
Wow. Yeah. Mine sounds really lame compared to that. I was struggling on whether I should do like something I really want to do or something that I've already done. I'm going to go with the already done. I've always wanted to go to see a rocket launch, an actual NASA rocket launch.
And now they're launching
again. Which is huge, on our way back to the moon and eventually Mars. But I haven't done that before. So I'll just say you should go. I think everyone should go to an OmniMax movie. Not an IMAX movie, but an OmniMax movie. So, like, for those of you who don't know, the OmniMax is essentially that theater that's usually at, like, either museums or I think other places have them in other spaces, but usually they're at museums. And you sit down and the screen is a dome, like a half dome instead of a screen. And you can watch movies that way, where it looks like everything is, like, around you. Like, it's super cool. I think everyone should be able to do that at least once. And if you're in the Cincinnati area, they have it at Union Terminal. It's at the very back.
Shout out to Union Terminal, I guess.
Shout out to Union Terminal.
I'm going to keep with the space theme because I used to work at the National Air and Space Museum.
Yeah, you did.
Talking to and obviously not everyone's going to go to space. So I'm going to pivot. Don't worry. But talking to astronauts, there's like something that changes in their minds when they go to space because they realize how small and kind of insignificant you as an individual are in the grand scheme of everything, right? And there's this very well-known picture called the little blue dot, and all of the humans that have ever existed are on that dot except for the person taking the photo. Mm-hmm. And it kind of just, for me, it's like, oh, why am I worrying about all of these things and putting things into that more grand perspective? So obviously you can't go to space. So what I would say is I think everyone should do a hot air balloon. Mm-hmm. Planes, you don't really get that perspective, but a hot air balloon, you are still kind of floating weightlessly up there, and you're kind of letting the wind take you and you don't know where you're going, but you still get that perspective of how big everything is. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. All right, Alex, we're going to jump back into America 250 real quick. We have 2 final questions. My first one is a very practical one. How can people, specifically young people, get involved still for America 250?
Yeah, so what I'll share is from Made by Us World, the easiest way for young people from ages 14 to 30 to get involved with our work at Youth250 is to go to youth250.org/letters and submit your letter to America. This is a campaign we just launched recently for the US 250th, focused on getting young people across the country to share their message at the US 250th. And this can be in written form, or it can be song, dance, art, music, whatever it may be. But we want to
make a video.
Opportunity. And if you're like Ryan, create a video. We wanted to share this opportunity to really invite folks of all different political identifications, all different levels of connection to the American story, to feel like they are a part of this narrative, whether or not they are someone who attends a local museum or is passionate about that at all. We really thought this would be a light lift but high impact way for folks to engage in the US 250th. So that's kind of the big way I'd share. But the second thing is, I think every young person listening, and folks who are not young as well, should go to their local cultural institution, their local museum, historic site, whatever it may be, for some of their 250th programming. There are incredible events all across the country, especially during civic season between Juneteenth and July 4th, where local institutions are inviting these exact conversations that we've been having on the podcast today about what it means to be an American, about what it means to be engaged in your local community and be part of the American story. So would really highly recommend folks to participate in both of those ways, and definitely check us out at History Made by Us on Instagram and TikTok if you want to follow along with some of our other opportunities that will pop up on the horizon. But really, I think the 250th is happening in communities all across the country, and it really is just such a beautiful opportunity to be part of this big American moment.
And I will second that. Follow Made by Us beyond America 250, because they're always posting some great content. And, this work doesn't end after, July 4th, 2026, right?
100%. Civic season is going to keep on happening. We're going to continue supporting our cultural institutions across the country and better engaging young adults, because we know the 250th is a benchmark for us and for many other people, but it's not the end. We're actually entering America's commemorative decade, really, as we're approaching the 250th of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, so many other pivotal moments in American history that I think this is actually just the start of what it looks like for us to kind of be in this commemorative period and a period of reflection on what it means to be an American.
100%.
Yes, well then on that, I will just say, and this is the one thing we ask all of our guests.
No matter what the conversation is, but it makes sense for this ending. But.
Oh, most definitely. Alex, what's your hope for the future?
Ooh, what is my hope for the future? My hope for the future is a world in which young people don't have to be leaders in their communities to live in a good world. I, as someone who is incredibly dedicated to youth empowerment and providing opportunities for young people to lead in all spaces and places across the country, it is so apparent to me that the number of young people who are pushed into advocacy, are pushed into taking on leadership at such a young age as a result of the failures of leadership by our older leaders. And that, to me, I really envision a world in which young people are allowed to enjoy their lives and, experience all the things that they wish to experience before having to dedicate themselves to a career or having to dedicate themselves to activism, to having to fight for their communities. And I think that world is possible, a world in which every child here in the U.S. and obviously my hope would be for everyone around the world as well, to be able to live in a world in which they were able to experience an authentic, fun, free childhood that unfortunately far too many Americans and young folks across all around the world don't have the same opportunity to experience.
Incredible.
That was great.
Yeah.
Good.
Thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Mm-hmm.
It was my pleasure. Thank you so much, Ryan, for inviting me, and Easton, such a joy to be in conversation with you as well. And really just so grateful for all of you at Connor Prairie for the incredible work that you do for young people, but for all people in your communities. You really are a leader in this field, and just very grateful to be able to work with you all.
Well, thank you. That's very kind of you to say, and we appreciate it. The pleasure is all ours. And still got work to do.
Mm-hmm.
So with that being said, thank you all for the audience. Thank you all for spending all this time with us. Be sure to check us out. We're on YouTube. We're on Spotify. We're on Apple Podcasts. Anywhere you get your podcast, we are there. So I'm Easton. Ryan, is there anything else? Sweet.
And I'm Ryan.
Thank y'all so much for listening and watching, and we'll see y'all next time.